And we're live. All right, y'all. Having a little bit of technical difficulty here. If you didn't see my posts on LinkedIn, just a quick heads up. We did have to reschedule the Eddie Q&A that was scheduled for today with Eddie Schlaner. So just a heads up, if you were signed up for that, it's getting pushed to next week. Sorry about that. It was out of our control, but we will have an amazing Q&A with Eddie Schlaner next Thursday at the same time. So I'll see you there. Anyway, so we're kicking off today's live stream earlier than previously planned. Rather than waiting for after that Q&A, we're going to kick it off right now. So this is day 4. Let me do my normal process here. I'm going to run through really quick and just make sure I get some people notifications that we're going live. Cool. Let me post on LinkedIn here. Give me a couple seconds to get all this lined up. Let me grab my link here. Cool. If you're joining me live, pop into the chat. Let me know who's here with us. I would love to say hello as we get things underway for today. Let's see. Gonna post that there. Let me cross post this on a couple places. Make sure everyone knows we're going live. I sort of, I don't know if you probably picked up on this, but I was trying to do kind of a I don't know, an innovative, I don't know if it's innovative, but a different sort of take on kind of an opt-in process here with, having people kind of interact on LinkedIn and then using that as sort of the platform to then notify people when we actually go live. Kind of mixed results, I would say, so far. It seems like, I think, functionally it tends to work. I don't know how often other people are like sort of checking LinkedIn or like seeing their notifications, etc. So it may not have the same impact as, say, an email, alerting about it. But I also didn't want to send an email every single day this week telling people to join the live stream. So trying to find kind of a compromise there with, kind of keeping it front and center, getting, kind of building the audience for these streams, but without, being annoying, I guess is sort of my main goal. Anyway, yeah, let's, I got some posts out there. Let's get into it real quick. Let me share my screen and we'll go through a quick recap and kind of set the scene for today. Right, so we are on day 4. Really quick recap. I won't go through too much detail, but we started on Monday reviewing customer interviews and sort of forming ICPs, and then ultimately choosing an ICP for which we are now focused. That ICP was essentially mid-market content leaders at mid-market businesses. So director of content, head of content, etc., at a business of roughly 200 to 1,000 or 500 to 5,000, somewhere in that sort of middle of the range size. So not startups, not necessarily like pure enterprise, but somewhere in the middle. Tuesday, we did channel and content research. So we took, again, starting from the interviews, we dug into the specific channels that these personas mentioned are sort of sources of information for them. LinkedIn, podcasts, newsletters, etc. And we did kind of channel and sort of content research. So basically, we dug through the specific creators, specific newsletters, etc., looking for their best performing content. And then based on that content, we tried to identify some themes and insights about what works on different channels for this particular audience. So that gives us kind of some guidance on what kind of content we may want to create as we get into the tactics today. By the way, I didn't fully hype it up, but we're getting to tactics today. I think this is most people's favorite part of content, right? Is like throwing ideas at the wall, coming up with crazy zany stuff. What we could do, what we could make, what we could write. So that's what we'll be doing today. Yesterday we kind of laid the groundwork for that, right? So this is my soapbox moment here, which is that tactics should always follow strategy. We've all got a million ideas for content that we want to create, or things we could do, stuff our competitors are doing. But if you're just sort of thinking about the tactics, hey, I'm going to write a post about this, or I'm going to post on LinkedIn every day, without thinking first about why am I doing that? Why am I creating that content? How is it valuable, and how does it help the business grow? Then you're almost always going to end up in sort of a land of chaos where you're just kind of creating stuff as it comes, and throwing stuff out there and seeing what works, but you don't really have a process or a strategy or a vision. So yesterday we focused on that strategy. We focused on defining the problems we're trying to solve, setting big picture goals, not specific like SMART goals, and then defining a strategy. So the strategy really comes down to like a guiding principle. Essentially, what are we trying to do and how are we trying to do it? That's what we did yesterday. Today, we now have that foundation on our canvas. We have got a sort of clear runway here to now get into much more specific detail. So today we're getting into channels, metrics, tactics. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define, based on these different strategies that we've laid out, what are the channels that make the most sense to sort of pursue that particular strategy? What are the metrics that we might use to measure the effectiveness based on the goal? And then what are some specific tactics? Now, we're not getting down to like, I'm going to write this specific LinkedIn post here, but we are going to get, tactical to the level of, I should regularly publish LinkedIn content that talks about this, or follows this theme, or fits into this, sort of category of content. So we're sort of thinking about this tactically in terms of the sort of specific types and flavors of content that we might make based on the channels. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Let me real quick pull up our content strategy canvas. So this is our working doc. By the way, I've been offering these templates. So we've got the buyer persona template, the channel research template, and the content strategy canvas template that we're working in today. Those are all available for free if you just check out our LinkedIn. Check out my LinkedIn posts. Each day, there's like a little prompt. You can just comment on the post to get the link for the for that template. If you're waiting on me or I haven't gotten back to you, I apologize. I've been trying to keep up with all the comments of people asking for those templates, but just to be transparent, I know I'm probably a little behind. And also, sometimes those comments do get lost in other comments and reactions and whatnot. So apologies, just ping me again, or feel free to reach out to me directly if you're looking to get your hands on these templates. Cool. Well, let's get into it then. So as I said, we'll kind of work through this basically in order here, right? So the first thing that we want to probably figure out is like, what are the channels that we're targeting based on the function, the goal, the strategy, etc. Then once we have a channel in mind, then we can kind of figure out, like, based on that goal, how might we kind of measure the effectiveness? So the metrics are valuable, I think, to kind of think about ahead of time before we really get into tactics, because that way you have sort of a sense of like, what does success look like, etc. And then we'll talk about tactics. So then we'll get into, what are we actually doing here, and what does this look like? Real quick, let me just check in on chat. Hey, what's up, Hassan, Manuel? Hey, good to see y'all. Yeah, thanks for joining. Cool. Let me get into it then. All right. So the first thing that we need to figure out is which channels make the most sense for our brand function. Keeping in mind that we are also, we're thinking about this in kind of 3 dimensions, right? So right now we're thinking purely about affinity. So affinity, our primary problem is that we're just trying to like get in front of the right people, get people to like us, kind of expand our bubble or our sphere of influence. And one key thing there is like kind of overcoming algorithmic barriers, or sort of working the algorithm, if you will, to expand our reach, right? So we don't really spend a lot of money like getting our content in front of people. So that means we need to kind of play the algorithm game to get in front of them. So a couple of things that tells us. First of all, let's go back to our channel list just so that we have kind of a refresher on which channels we think are most likely to be, kind of most relevant. So the first one is LinkedIn. The second one is YouTube, and sort of related is podcasts. As a recap, if you weren't joining us there, what we found was that when we dug into creators making content on YouTube and podcasts, they were essentially just repurposing the content for these two different channels. So we're kind of grouping those together. The third one is newsletters. And the fourth one, which we haven't spent a ton of time actually digging into yet, but we should probably keep on our radar, is communities. So communities is sort of a whole different beast, right? We could be creating content for communities. We could be using communities as as sort of a distribution channel for some of our other content potentially. I tend to lean towards the mindset at this stage in the game that you're really should be focusing on native content. So right, rather than writing a blog post and then going to LinkedIn and trying to get people to click to your blog post, I think we generally are going to want to think more about how do we create native content. Same thing I think applies for communities. So if we are going to pursue communities as a channel, I think we probably want to come up with sort of a native communities focused content. Now, that's not to say you can't repurpose some of the ideas and things that you're creating for other channels, but rather than trying to send people from the tofu Slack to the blog or from the tofu Slack to the LinkedIn, a lot of times it's more effective to just create that content or share that content directly in sort of the native community format. The other thing too is that I think that that's particularly true when we're talking about Affinity, right? Because when we're thinking about Affinity as sort of a stage in the funnel, all we're really trying to do again is get people to like know and like us. So getting them to take a specific action or go to a specific page or click a specific link isn't really a goal at this stage. So it's okay to just sort of share content freely without a call to action or without a link or without trying to get somebody to sort of enter the funnel per se. Okay, so based on what we know about these channels and some of the insights that we have, I have a pretty good idea of kind of how these are going to map back to the funnel and our specific goals. But let's just talk through it so that we're on the same page. I think LinkedIn is a no-brainer here for Affinity, right? So first of all, LinkedIn, we sort of have we talked about like the algorithmic bubble and sort of reaching the broadest possible segment of our potential buyers. Those people all live on LinkedIn, or a majority of them are, at least have a LinkedIn if they're not using it regularly. The other thing too that we identified in sort of analyzing this content is that the content that seems to perform the best amongst creators that we studied really focused on emotional resonance. So based on specific pain points or painful experiences, meaning that it sort of lends itself to like a brand strategy, right? Where you can sort of focus on that emotional resonance. You're not necessarily getting super duper tactical or like teaching somebody exactly how to do a thing, but you are sort of letting them know that you understand their pain points and using that to kind of build, to kind of generate engagement, which again serves our purpose of breaking through the algorithm a little bit, right? The more engagement that we get, generally the more exposure our content will also have. So I think that's a no-brainer. Having an opinion, humans making content, humans, sort of focusing in on some of these themes, and then you having sort of a thematic remixing strategy makes a lot of sense to me here. YouTube podcasts, I don't think are, I would say they're probably not primarily an affinity play or like a brand affinity play, right? Like at that level of the funnel. This is going to be a little bit more of a commitment. People are going to need a little bit more detail. If you recall again from our analysis here, the content that really seemed to perform well on these channels did start to get a little bit more actionable. It wasn't super duper tactical per se, but it was at least like, here's an outcome that you're trying to achieve. And here's somebody talking about how they achieved it, right? So it's probably not going to walk you through, setting up an Asana board or something, but it's at least going to give you a vision or an idea about the path to achieving a specific outcome. So to me, that says middle of the funnel, essentially, right? Somewhere in the middle, somewhere between top and middle of the funnel is where sort of a YouTube podcast kind of strategy is most likely to sit. Newsletter, of course, is perhaps of these channels is sort of the biggest commitment, meaning that somebody has to actually like give you an email address and like opt in to receiving emails from you. And we also found that this tends to be like the content here tends to be the most tactical, right? So one of the big ones that we learned a lot from was Lenny's newsletter. Lenny, of course, if you're not familiar with Lenny, he's like a super duper marketing, like growth and product guy. Uh, Lots of people mentioned him by name in our interviews as a source of content and inspiration. And one of the things that he does really well, let me just pull this up. First of all, sort of interesting is that he has sort of like these guest authors, but I think this is still indicative of the content itself. Um, it's sort of a great blend between strategic and tactical, right? So if you look at the content itself, right, you start with like the very high level, like, hey, look, we're reigniting our user growth. We, 350% growth acceleration. So we're starting at the very high level, like, here's a vision for a specific outcome that you probably want to achieve. Now we're going to dig into it. We're going to, sort of analyze it. And then we're going to talk about it in terms of both like a framework or a strategy at a high level. So like, what does this actually look like? How do they make this happen? But then we're also they also dig into the actual execution and the tactics to say, okay, they started by increasing this gamification, and here's some specific examples about how that turned into tactics. So I think newsletter, if we're thinking about newsletter, that's I would say like pretty deep into the funnel, right? It's sort of getting into the weeds of how do you actually do this thing? What does it look like day to day? Those types of things. So let's now go back to our canvas here again and talk through the channels. Okay, so our first goal here is to increase the social reach for brand accounts and personal accounts of Optimist team/network. And so the strategy that we talked about yesterday for brand at this stage is to create some kind of content, create and share some kind of content that inspires collective participation from the entire Optimist network. So the idea here being, hey, we're going to share something on LinkedIn rather than like compelling our team to go post on LinkedIn with us. Can we sort of inspire them or incentivize them in some way to share? So the first thing I'll mention here is like, again, I think the channels here are pretty clear to me. I think LinkedIn is definitely one. The other thing I think is probably like community. So we haven't talked a ton about community yet, but I do think that there's definitely a play if we dig into community as a channel. And again, the beauty here is that we've got sort of this network effect that we're trying to unlock with Optimist and our team and our sort of extended network of writers, designers, etc. And those folks are also active in these communities, right? Or not all of them, but some of them are. And so again, can we sort of leverage that as a strategic advantage to say, okay, how do we use that to amplify our brand and get us in front of more and more people that kind of fit into the broader segment that we're trying to reach. So how would we measure effectiveness here? So if our goal is to increase the collective reach, I mean, impressions on brand and personal content, I mean, I think is a no-brainer. I would say like shares of brand and personal content. And then I think comments, right? I mean, that's sort of the trifecta of engagement on LinkedIn, right? And so a couple reasons why I'm choosing these specific metrics. One, because they do kind of speak to the goal, which is to increase the collective social reach. And two, they also tie into this key problem that we identified, which is that in order to increase these collective, our collective reach, we've got to kind of overcome the algorithmic barriers, which is generally dictated by engagement, right? So the more engagement your content gets, generally the more eyeballs, more exposure it will receive. So I think those are pretty straightforward metrics. Let's talk a little bit about tactics. And here's where we can, just kind of brainstorm. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. But what might this content actually look like that we're creating on LinkedIn to kind of increase this collective social reach for brand accounts and personal accounts? I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind here is, highlighting individuals from within that network, right? I mean, that seems like a no-brainer. So something, something very straightforward might be like a team member spotlight, right? And again, we don't have to write an individual LinkedIn post here. We're just trying to think about like thematically, if we were gonna sort of serialize this content or create multiple posts that kind of pursue this goal and this strategy, what might it look like? So yeah, I think some kind of a team member spotlight series or something would be one way that we could approach it. Um, by the way, I'm gonna just throw tactics in this list. I'm not saying that all these are gonna make it into the final strategy, but um, another another way that we might approach that. So if let's say I post one post and I talk about Christina, who's a member of our team. She's a really cool writer and has done strategy work and worked with clients and stuff in the past. Um, we post one big, spotlight about her and how great she is and the work that she does. That's something that could definitely encourage and kind of unlock some engagement from her and potentially other members of our team who want to sort of celebrate her as well. Another approach that we could do here is, can we sort of amplify that further? So could we, instead of focusing on sort of one team member at a time, could we also or separately create content that's sort of like some kind of I don't know if it's like work or project or client based, but some kind of a collective acknowledgement. So we're saying like, hey, look, we published this really awesome article for our client that we love called X, and here's all the people who are involved. They are all awesome, right? So I'm just thinking about like sort of the mechanics of how we sort of unlock this, and generally it's going to be that we tag someone, right? So I tagged you in a post. My post is all about how great you are. There's a reasonably high chance that you'll share it, right? And especially if it also sort of helps like transfer some kind of additional social proof to other people who you also care about, right? So some sort of like collective team acknowledgement content, team behind content X, something like that, right? So I think that's pretty straightforward way to think about it. But basically, we're just sort of coming up with, how do we sort of highlight these people and engage them in a way that encourages them to share and engage with our content and sort of unlock that network effect. What else could this look like? Navin's having ice cream. Navin, not sure how you pronounce that for sure. Let me know. Let me know in the chat if I got it right. But yeah, love that, man. Thanks for joining. Let's see. All right, so yeah. What else might this look like from a brand perspective? I'm gonna flip back here to my other sheet and sort of just take a look. Yeah, so I don't see of the examples that we sort of analyzed of other folks in the space, I don't really see anybody kind of pursuing a strategy like this where they're like kind of intentionally trying to uh unlock that like that network effect by like tagging people, that kind of thing. Um I know, first of all, by the way, I know that can be really annoying if it's overdone. So I'm aware. um but most of these strategies, most of the content that these people are creating, I think, is sort of more pure, purely focused on just sort of like building their own personal audience through sort of sheer content creation, which I think kind of comes down here to this like demand gen component, right? So I think we'll talk about this in just a moment, but for now, let's jump to the next channel here, which is community, and we'll probably circle back here to LinkedIn and come up with some other ideas here. How do we measure the effectiveness of community? Again, with the acknowledgement that our goal there is really to sort of engage with our existing network in the communities in which they are also active as like individual members or contributors. Yeah, so I think for most of these communities, it's going to depend on what the specific metrics. First of all, are going to depend a little bit on the platform. So I'm just going to say like engagement with community native content, right? And that can be kind of all encompassing, depending on I don't know if it's on Slack or Discord or School or wherever these people kind of live. Most likely it's Slack, but we'll just say keep it fairly broad. Some kind of a measurement of engagement with those posts. I think is a big one. Another idea here that I just hit me was like some kind of like award or acknowledgement. So I mean, we've already kind of talked about acknowledgement as a lever here, but I think like we could also like have that as sort of a more formal structure where there is like some kind of an actual like award, like I don't know, Optimist of the Week or something. Borderline perhaps a little corny, but I think we could theoretically execute that well in a way that wouldn't be that wouldn't feel too contrived. So that's one idea. Let's talk about community content. What kind of content there is going to generate engagement with the community, sort of by way of leveraging our existing social network or our kind of business network. Maybe like endorsements. So one of the big functions of these communities is generally work opportunities or finding work, finding new clients, that kind of thing. Like, if you're not super familiar with the Optimist model, right? All of our team, everyone on our team and in our kind of extended network, they're full-time professional freelancers. So they're always kind of hustling for work. So yeah, could we create kind of like an endorsement, kind of a public endorsement of team members we like, something like that, right? So publicly endorsing the people that are already part of our team and sort of helping them kind of elevate their profile within these communities, which also has sort of a knock-on effect, I think, of sort of helping the community itself, because in most of these communities there are a lot of people vying for jobs, just like everywhere else where you post jobs or share work opportunities. And so being able to see like, oh, okay, like here sort of a hand-picked, vetted, kind of review of this particular person and their skills and abilities, I think could also be super valuable for other members of the community, and likely would get some engagement. A similar thing might be some kind of a, again, if we take the sort of base idea and say, okay, if one endorsing one person is good, then could we endorse multiple people? So maybe some kind of like a curated list that we maintain, and we sort of announce like, okay, hey, we're adding people to our list of like sort of publicly endorsed freelancers that we have worked with and we enjoy working with, that kind of thing. That could be an interesting strategy here. So like a publicly curated list of endorsed freelancers. that could be an interesting idea. And once again, sort of amplifies that value, right? So we're taking the value, if it was on one before when we're, sort of publicly endorsing an individual, now we're sort of turning it to 10 and saying, hey, we're actually endorsing these 20 people. They're all great. And that is, again, going to help, I think, help people find talent, which is good. One thing that I will mention here is that we haven't, none of these tactics so far have really spoken to our work per se as an agency, right? So it's sort of, there's an element of our brand that is tied to our model and, supporting freelancers and paying people well, and, these types of sort of, employer brand uh, elements. But none of this stuff so far, well, that's not entirely true. This collective team acknowledgement tactic does sort of speak to, there's sort of a tacit element that is saying, like, hey, not only do we work with these really great people and we're gonna like get them to engage with our content, but we also create really great content as a team. Like, here's sort of proof of that. Um, yeah, so I guess that is a good example, but I think we probably need to think about a couple more tactics that kind of fit into that. So achieving these specific goals, but also sort of advancing the brand of Optimist as, sort of the go-to team to create content for your brand, for your business. Um, yeah, what does that look like? I wonder if we could sort of flip this process on its head. So rather than us coming out and necessarily and like sort of endorsing the individuals, is there a strategy here where we sort of solicit some kind of endorsement from the members of our network, and use that as sort of a content tactic, right? So, you know, Optimist has really figured out, how to put together a great workflow. Here are what 10 of our team members say about how easy we are to work with, or how, seamless our process is, or how, good our writing is, or whatever it is. Um, yeah, could we kind of flip that on its head and do some kind of an endorsement uh, piece of content, right? So let's. I'm just going to jot that down again. Not saying all these ideas are brilliant. uh, we haven't really thought too much about different formats of content. I mean, I think most of these tactics could be, video or audio, or uh, you know, most of it's probably long form, or visual content of some sort. Um, yeah, I don't think that really plays a factor in here. Although I will say, like, if I just put my video hat on for a second, just to see if there's any other options there or any other ideas that come to mind. Yeah, would I approach this differently if I were thinking about sort of a purely, video strategy for LinkedIn? Um, I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay, I think we're gonna leave that one where it's at for right now, and move on to the next function here. But yeah, feel free to chime in the chat if you have any other thoughts or ideas. Oh, Manuel, thanks for chiming in here. Yeah. Oh, thanks, guys. Sorry, I missed some of these chats. I am Naveen. Thanks for helping me with that. And thanks for your idea. At the end of mapping of a lead across the funnel, so the people who handled or interacted with them at different stages. Okay. Okay, that's interesting. So would that be, Naveen? Would the idea there be that we like sort of walk through like a lead that became a client for us at Optimist, and sort of talk about how different people played a role in sort of talking to that lead, working with them, etc. Is that kind of how you're seeing that? Would love to get your insight there and appreciate the input. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Acknowledging and drawing a sales pipeline. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm capturing that right, but let me know if I'm mischaracterizing that. I think yeah, that's an interesting idea for sure. Let me just pull that up. Let me drop that in here. So, um, pipeline timeline with acknowledgement of specific um, team members and their contributions. I think I'm capturing that adequately there. No bad ideas in a brainstorm. Amen, Chris. Thanks. You're saying community metrics are hard. I want to measure more towards consistency of engagement over time versus individual results like impressions. Yeah, that's a good call. Maybe do we want to get more specific on that metric and say, average or like weekly? Maybe it's just like weekly, right? I think that's how LinkedIn sort of default measures or reports anyway. So maybe it's and that also is sort of by default a sort of an aggregate or like an average. So I'm gonna update that. Let me know if you have additional thoughts on the metrics there. I appreciate that input as well. Yeah, definitely agree. Definitely agree, Chris. Manuel, hey man, how you doing? LinkedIn, at least you can borrow credibility. Yeah, no, I think that's a totally valid term. To support your strategy, content must be good though, or honest, or transparent, or authentic. Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what we're trying to do, right? In a little bit of the way, right? Is there sort of a transfer of social proof that we're trying to engage in here, both from our perspective and also from the perspective of the people who were trying to get to engage with our content, right? So I think it kind of goes both ways. But yeah, I definitely think that's sort of a central tenet of what we need to achieve here with any kind of social content for sure. Good call out. Okay, so thanks again for the input, guys. Feel free to drop some more thoughts in the chat. Appreciate it. Let's jump up here to demand gen. So our just to recap again, our goals here are a little bit different. We're still in the affinity stage, so we're sort of at the awareness stage of demand gen. One of the things that we talked about one of the things that we talked about yesterday was that sort of the difference in my mind, at least, between brand and demand gen at this stage in the funnel is that brand is sort of like let's say pure awareness. So just like people have heard of us, basically, is sort of the North Star metric there. Whereas demand gen, I think, is more like specific awareness, or like awareness of what we do. Let's say. And so the goal there, while it does overlap with these goals, I think it's to get more people to again know who we are, but also know like what we do. So if somebody were to say, hey, have you heard of that agency Optimist? They would say, oh yeah, I know them. They're a content marketing agency. They do X, Y, and Z. Maybe they work with these types of businesses, something like that. So not just they recognize our name and our logo, but they actually know a little bit about us and what we do. And so the goal here is sort of one step deeper, which is that what we identified was that like one key way or one major way that people sort of at least have just that baseline awareness is they just go to our homepage, right? So if you visit our homepage, you'll see sort of our messaging and our positioning and our a little bit about our brand and what we do and all that stuff. So you'll at least walk away with like a general sense of who we are as a business and what we do. Now, again, that's not the deepest level of engagement, but I think increasing those visits to the homepage, I think is valuable here. So how do we want to do this? I think first of all, I think the same general channels are most likely applicable here. Because we're still at this very sort of pre-funnel affinity stage. We're just trying to kind of grow our addressable audience. I don't think we're thinking about the other channels quite yet. I think we're still focused on LinkedIn and communities. Now, not to say that LinkedIn and communities have to be the channels for all of these, but I think for right now, I think it makes the most sense. Oops. So how do we? I mean, I think this one's pretty straight. Dang it, I keep doing that. I guess I could still have merged it. Would have got the same result. Anyway, we know that our metric here, right? So we already know that we're trying to increase visits to the homepage. So I think, clicks, traffic to Optimist homepage from LinkedIn. Pretty straightforward. And I think same thing here, right? Traffic to Optimist homepage from community channels. Those metrics are pretty straightforward. I don't think we need to put much else there in terms of like a qualifier. I mean, obviously, the better content, the more time they spend, if they check out other sites, if they generate leads, that kind of stuff, that would all be great. But for this stage in the funnel, again, really all our goal is to our only goal is to just get them to our homepage so they know who we are, they know what we do. And so, later on, hopefully when they engage with some of our content that's deeper in the funnel, they'll already have like a good thought about us. And so, again, we're not trying to do everything at every stage of the funnel, but we are trying to do it all across the entire funnel, if you will. So what might be some tactics for how we do this. So our sort of main strategy here that we identified yesterday was that we would focus primarily on transparent building and public content. Yes, little meta. Hey guys. But what might that actually look like? There's a couple key constraints there, right? So one is that generally speaking, we can't build in public as it relates to client work, right? Like most clients don't want us live streaming how we built their strategy for fear of competitors. We can do something like this, certainly, right? Where we're sort of building for ourselves. I think that's let's just call that like Optimist journey content. I think that's a no-brainer. Like I've been doing that basically since day one of Optimist, in various formats and various forms. We found it to be pretty effective, at least again, for building sort of brand affinity. I don't think it's necessarily the greatest driver of leads in the universe, but I do think, it keeps us top of mind. It's sort of helped us build a much broader networking community than we would have if we were just sort of focused purely and only on lead gen. So I think Optimist journey content is a no-brainer there. What are some other tactics? What are some other ways that we can sort of build in public to increase that awareness? Again, just to kind of recap some of the thinking from last week, right? The mechanism, or not from last week, from yesterday. It's been that long of a week already. The thinking from yesterday is that the mechanism here is basically, somebody sees a piece of content, they find it intriguing, they've got to either click on my profile or somebody else's profile, they've got to go to your company page, they've got to click your link, right? So we've got to build a certain level of, we've got to sort of make the business and the brand central to the content itself, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? In order to sort of maximize, this is my hypothesis at least, in order to maximize the chance that somebody's going to go through all those steps to actually come to our website based on a post, right? So if I just post something that's like, here's how to make really good content, right? And it's just sort of like five tips or whatever, even if that content went super viral, a very small percentage of those people are going to walk away with any knowledge about Optimist, right? They might like me, they might like the content that I created, but they're not really going to spend a lot of time checking out Optimist unless the content itself is about Optimist, in which case they're more likely to dig in, I think. So, the Optimist journey content is a big one. We could maybe take that like once, or maybe the process here should be to kind of dissect this a little bit further. So maybe like Optimist business and growth journey, right? So this has primarily been the content that we've shared over the years, right? Which is like, hey, it's year 4. Here's how much revenue we made. Like, here's what happened in our business. So it's kind of high level, like just about what we're building and kind of what we're doing as a company. Another interesting piece of this, and sort of ties into some of the pain points, I would say more closely, of our ICP, which is that like figuring out the ops part. So one of the pieces of feedback that we got from okay, I just had another thought. So first of all, Optimist ops evolution content focus on basically some of the things that we're identifying internally, some of the challenges and stuff that we maybe are struggling with in scaling content, and then kind of how we solved it or how we improved this process to achieve more efficiency, whatever, right? So we're sort of talking about kind of the meta process of creating content for clients, and how we have fixed those bottlenecks. uh, the next thing is the Optimist content slash marketing is a content slash marketing report. Okay, so we're building a content marketing strategy for Optimist right now. I would assume that if people are interested in watching me do this and brainstorm in a spreadsheet for 3 hours a day for a week, they'd probably be pretty interested in also seeing the results of that, right? So, could we sort of publish like a state of our own marketing kind of thing where we're talking about the content, we're sort of digging into all these metrics and things, and sort of bringing all that back, and then sort of closing the loop to say, okay, here's what we figured out, here's what we decided back when we built this strategy, and now here's what we've executed, and here's what the results are looking like. So sort of turning this into more of like an ongoing series where we're sort of sharing and building those marketing results in public. I love that idea. Love that idea. Hopefully we do a good job. And I think there's also a benefit there. I'm not going to lie, because marketing for yourself is always hard. You always come last when you've got client work to do, and so having a little bit of a sort of built-in accountability, as doing sort of like a building in public kind of thing, is helpful, at least for me personally. Let's talk about communities. By the way, one thing I just want to mention here about communities, because we mentioned we talked about like Slack and Discord and those types of communities, which I think are the predominant channels that a lot of folks are sort of interacting in this space. But certainly we should not forget about broader community channels like Reddit, like Quora. And in fact, we could probably get more specific here about these channels, because we could probably develop specific strategies for Slack communities and specific strategies for, let's say, Reddit communities, right? Like that there's likely a difference there. Which, by the way, I mentioned this yesterday also, but like this sheet as it is sort of simplified in a couple different ways to try to make it as sort of approachable as possible. But we could get way more specific on each of these things, right? We could have problems that we're trying to solve associated with each goal and strategy and channel, right? That could be its own problem, for instance. Then we could get even more granular than just like thinking about LinkedIn. We could have a specific strategy for LinkedIn carousels and LinkedIn video and LinkedIn text posts. We're not getting to that granular level. I will say, in general, I encourage people to get sort of as specific as possible, because they're just different. There's different physics that come into play when you're thinking about LinkedIn carousels versus LinkedIn text posts. I mean, that's just there's sort of nuance there that right now we're not really capturing it. We're just sort of grouping it all together, which I think is fine at this stage in the process. But as you get into it, you may want to start to drill even deeper into your strategy, and sort of segment it even further. Anyway, sorry about the soapbox moment there. Pipeline timeline reels on Insta and TikTok. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Naveen. Um, so yeah, what's our community strategy for getting people, again, let's from Slack, etc., Reddit perhaps, to then like click into our homepage? I mean, I don't think it's much different, to be honest. If I really think about it, I think this stuff is valuable. I suppose another thing that we didn't capture here is like a case study. I know we talked about building in public, so we're focused primarily on like kind of meta content about Optimist itself, which I think is still important. Another way to sort of inject Optimist into the story, though, is to have like a case study, right? So I think case study content is valuable here, especially if it's like sort of a truly like valuable case study that teaches you something, rather than just sort of touting our work, but actually says like here's how we actually did it, and why it was effective. I think that's a good use of a case study as a format. Trying to think if there's anything else that I would do in communities specifically for this like demand gen thing. Trying to build awareness of the brand, but also what we do. And I want it to work on in various types of communities, such as, a super path or, a Reddit R marketing potentially. Although I would say most of the marketing subreddits are dumpster fires, but that's beside the point, maybe. Um, hmm. Sorry, I'm noodling on this one a little bit. I don't have nothing's coming straight to mind, but I don't want to just leave it blank. If I can maybe come up with something that would work here. So one of the things that I will sometimes do, when I get stuck, as we all do during exercises like this, is just go kind of look back at So I'm pulling up Superpath right now on my screen. Just kind of look at like what's going on here. Maybe get any ideas about content that's being shared or generating some engagement. Um, hmm. I don't have any. I'm not coming across anything that's really sort of striking a chord for me right now. Let me check chat to see if anybody else chimed in. Chris mentioned ask marketing. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, it's probably the best. Uh, that's actually a good. Okay, okay. That did give me an idea. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for chiming in there. And Naveen, I see you're throwing some ideas out as well. Problem solved within a case study. Yeah, very true. That's another idea. What if we did like yeah, like ask a content marketing person, or like oh, let's just say again, I'm just thinking about this in terms of execution. Like, what might this actually look like a serialized, every week we post in Superpath and we say, here's a question that we're getting about content marketing and here's our response. Something like that, right? So basically the idea being that, like, hey, we're answering like sort of a common question. In that, we get to sort of inject our expertise. And by the way, we can sort of tack on, like, by the way, I'm Tyler, I run Optimist, we do this, this, and this. You can check us out at yesoptimist.com. So I think that's a good one. I think that's a good way to approach it, right? So it'd just be like, just like pick a question. Doesn't have to, it could be whatever. It can be, how should I approach my content marketing strategy for X, Y, or Z, or, how should I measure my SEO results, or, whatever, any kind of common questions that we hear a lot. And I'm just sort of like preemptively answering that question for the community. Of course, if it is like a community, I could just be responding to questions. So maybe that's another good way to think about it here. Is it like uh, proactive questions with answers, right? Like top questions from this week, kind of a post where we're sort of just like we're creating content specifically for the community, and then there's sort of answering questions. I suppose is another one. A lot of people don't think about that as a content strategy, but it kind of blends into like a community strategy maybe. But yeah, I think engaging with the community, answering questions that people have, giving your insight and feedback is certainly a form of content marketing. So I think that's maybe a valuable way to think about it as well. And I would say either of these, we could potentially, again, if our goal, because our goal is to increase visits to our homepage, we don't want to be super shilly. We don't want to seem like super shills posting, posting an answer and then immediately being like, hey, go check out our website. But if we could, if we can answer those questions, let's say like in like a loom, then I think that gets people kind of one step closer to our playground, if you will. And we have a little bit more control. Like I can add a description that says like, hey, I answered this question. My name's Tyler. Here's my website, that kind of thing. And it's more of like a passive thing, but it's more likely to drive traffic to my website than if I try to shill for my website, directly on Reddit or in somebody else's community. So that's that's a good way to think about it. Like let's think about answering those questions, providing answers to folks in general, and in a couple different ways. Office hours style. Yeah, that's also an interesting idea, Chris. Yeah, thanks for that one as well. I think I can take a couple different formats there. I think this maybe comes like after you build credibility, right? So if you have like a bunch of credibility within a particular community, then you can kind of elevate yourself to like the expert, or you have like a regular segment or something where you're like engaging with the community in like a predictable way, I guess. Love that. Okay, let's talk about the next function here, which is the life cycle. So once again, as a quick reminder from what we decided yesterday, we talked about life cycle, right? You typically think about life cycle as sort of after the sale. Typically think about it as retention, focus, that kind of thing. One of the things that we talked about was that part of retention is affinity, right? So the more that our clients like us and love us and think highly of us, the more likely in general they are to like stick around and work with us, right? So we pulled life cycle into our affinity stage of the funnel, because we wanted to have some kind of a process or a strategy for how do we build and maintain that affinity with people who already pay us money. So our goal here that we talked about was basically to the sheet's getting long. Let me freeze my cells here. So we talked about our goal being, basically to increase client engagement, sharing, signups, etc., with our content. So basically, we would have sort of a separate set of metrics that would focus not just on like how many engagements our LinkedIn posts get, but like how many of our clients engaged with those LinkedIn posts. Speaking of which, before we talk metrics, we should talk channels. I think community is a harder channel for this function. Yeah. So interesting. So I think this is a couple things. I think it's, first of all, it's LinkedIn, for sure. We're connected with most of our clients on LinkedIn, unsurprisingly, or our several of our points of contact at a client. The other thing that we'll talk about is podcast, YouTube, right? So we haven't really touched on these channels yet because we're talking about how those are sort of lower in the funnel. But I think in this case, it's relevant for measuring this output, right, or this outcome. So if we're trying to increase our client engagement, we're trying to increase our client engagement with sort of all types of content that we're creating for the most part. And so, certainly on LinkedIn, right? So let's just, client engagements with LinkedIn posts or something, right? That would be one. Again, probably get more specific than that. I'll come back to that. This one, client engagements with podcast, YouTube. And then client subscription open from newsletter, or of newsletter. I wrote that in a weird way. you get the idea, right? So we want to know like how many of our clients are subscribing to our newsletter and then actually consuming that content, right? So they're sort of building building that level of engagement and affinity with us, or maintaining it, I should say. Is there a better way? I don't know how we track this super closely, right? I've never done a formal podcast, so I don't know what the analytics quite look like on the podcast side. but I'm pretty sure that I can't, figure out a specific person who listens to my podcast. Same thing with YouTube, right? I can see YouTube views, but I can't necessarily see like who is viewing it unless you comment. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like client comments or messages about this, right? So it's like, yeah, I think that's probably worthwhile to think about it that way. I can say anecdotally, right now we host the live streams and stuff for Tofu. I've got some clients that attend that kind of stuff. I almost always get some kind of feedback from the clients when they attend, right? They send me an email, they say, hey, that was a really great session. Can we talk about this on our next call? Or, sometimes they'll chime in with an actual question during like a Q&A. So I think, yeah, we could measure this even if it's not perfect, right? It's not we're not gonna have perfect data about how many of our clients listen to these podcasts. Not every single person is going to say something, but in general, if the number is increasing, that means they're more engaged with the content. So we talked briefly about tactics yesterday just to kind of get the ball rolling here. But one of the ideas, the most basic and straightforward tactic that we can do here is we can send the new and upcoming content to existing clients each month in like a newsletter, right? So we could create. And let me actually reframe that, right? So like basically we could create a client newsletter where we're sort of including our current and upcoming content from these channels. Not sure how. Might be a little weird to send them LinkedIn links, but although I don't know why. I mean, you send people links to a blog post, that's fine. But if you send them a link to a LinkedIn post, for some reason that feels weird. But yeah, that's the most basic thing, right? If we want to sort of juice the engagement of our existing clients, we just sort of send them links and kind of let them know that it's coming. I think that's, we've got sort of a captive audience there. What's another way that we do this? I mean, if we want to take that like sort of one step deeper or one step like more specific, yeah, we could sort of like curate these recommendations. It feels a little spoon feedy if we're doing it like that, right? It's certainly not scalable, but or not like super scalable. But yeah, I mean, in theory, right, we could say, oh, hey, we're sending out a newsletter this week about programmatic SEO, and we know that one of our two of our clients are really interested in that. We could like sort of manually and personally like send that to them to say, hey, by the way, we did this thing about programmatic SEO, like you might find it valuable or whatever. So I mean, again, no bad ideas here. So we'll put it down. Thanks again for that reminder, Chris. Manually curate selected content for exists and okay. Let me take that one idea further. Right. So the other thing that we can do is we can manually curate selected content for new clients. Right. So when a client comes in and we start working with them, we know a little bit about what they're trying to do. We could send them some of these things, which would likely encourage them to then, engage with or subscribe to future content. So just an example, right? Let's say, yeah, we get somebody who comes in and we're start working with them and they're really focused on, programmatic SEO and like user generated content. I might say, hey, we're really excited to kick things off. By the way, I thought you might find this workshop valuable. I had Tori Gray on and she talked about, using UGC to scale your SEO strategy last year. Right. And so sending that link there, which again is going to sort of, if they're not already aware of us, it's going to sort of introduce them to our, our sort of marketing content, as it were. And sort of demonstrate our expertise. It's also going to demonstrate the fact that like we sort of understand their needs and we're thinking about their priorities. And that and sort of there's like a social proof element there too, because if there's sort of a guest that is high profile, especially that kind of lends us some additional credibility. I think that's a good strategy right there, right? And that doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a newsletter, it doesn't even have to be like an ongoing like content piece of content per se, but it is it is sort of a content distribution tactic, right? So I think it's worth thinking about that. Oh, AMA. Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call, guys. Yeah, thanks for shouting that out. I know I kind of moved past the community stuff already, but yeah, we should probably come back to that. Or we can definitely add that to our sheet. So we could do an AMA format. How would we frame that? You know, would it just be like I'm Tyler and I run a content marketing agency, or how would I sort of how would I best position myself to maximize the the value of that, you know, again, specifically from sort of a demand gen perspective. So I'm trying to get our audience to know me and to know our brand and to know like what we do, presumably by way of visiting our website or our homepage specifically. So if I'm hosting an AMA, I just say, "Hey, I'm Tyler. I run a content marketing agency called Optimist. You know, ask me anything." Or you know, do I? Is that enough of a hook? I guess is maybe my question. Yeah, Chris is saying that's not bad. Okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, now you guys got the wheels turning here. Here's an idea. What if we so there's a couple ways that you know I could frame this a bunch of different ways, right? I could come in, I could say, hey, I run a content marketing agency. Ask me anything about content marketing. You know, have it answer your questions, or you know, ask me anything about SEO or whatever. You know, those types of topics that are sort of relevant, and there's a value to that. I could also, you know, I could come in and say, you know, hey, I've built an agency and I've scaled it from you know zero to $1 million in a year, or whatever you know, whatever the narrative is there. That's going to attract, I think, a slightly different audience, generally like a more entrepreneurial audience, probably more freelancers and solopreneurs and agency owners or aspiring agency owners. Um, the other way that I could do it is, what if it's like, you know, sort of like a client confessional kind of angle, right? So it's like, hey, content marketing leaders at mid-sized businesses. I'm Tyler. I run a content marketing agency. I've worked with clients and I've heard all the horror stories about, you know, running a content program and hiring agencies. You know, ask me anything about how to hire an agency or how to effectively outsource your content or about basically like like the operations part of content. Uh, I feel like that's an in. I mean, that might even be bordering on lead generation. But like the idea being that like I can sort of inject our expertise as, you know, not just at creating content, but at like figuring out the logistics of how to effectively create content and collaborate effectively with clients and sort of the, you know, I guess like the soft skills that go into running a content marketing agency. And I mean, maybe that's just one particular topic, but I mean, I think that's a pretty evergreen set of challenges there. Need social proof. Okay, yeah, Chris, thanks. That's a good clarification. Lead with results, pull eyeballs with numbers like leads. Yeah, sure, makes total sense. Yeah, yeah. So have some kind of social proof attached to, you know, if we're going to go down this route, you know, the thing that's going to pull people in is not just I run a content marketing agency, but yeah, I run a content marketing agency that works with clients like X, Y, and Z, or achieved X outcome for Y business, or you know, whatever. Right? Have some kind of social proof. Makes total sense. Cool. Well, once again, thanks guys for chiming in here. I really appreciate the insight and the ideas. I think we got a lot of really cool things here in the works. As I said, obviously, you know, we're not going to do all of these things, and we're certainly not going to do all of them all at once. But I think we've got a pretty good list going here. Um, there's maybe another idea here I haven't come up with yet, but I think yeah, there's probably one other thing that we could do here. At least one other thing that we could do here around this like life cycle and increasing our client engagement with our content. Um, but for now, I'm really just drawn to this idea of like manually curating as part of the onboarding process. Because it's like super easy. You know, you just basically we just add a step to our Asana to say like, hey, by the way, go through the catalog, pull some content, and send it to them. B, I think, as I said, it just like sets the tone for the engagement. And C, it's like it's I'm always worried about touching the clients too much, being uh too needy with clients. And so I don't necessarily know if I want to send them a newsletter every week or every month, just because they're a client of ours. A lot of these people are super busy, right? They don't necessarily want another newsletter, especially one that they didn't like. Uh, yeah. Anyway, I just don't know if I want to get into a cadence like that. Let's jump to tofu. All right, y'all. So we talked about Affinity. We talked about how to kind of build the brand, just get people to know us, know about what we do. Now we're going to talk about tofu topics. So, um, yeah. So our problem here that we're trying to basically solve is like getting marketers to diagnose common content marketing problems as symptoms of outdated models, thinking or strategies. So, again, essentially now we're sort of getting into like exploration or diagnosis of a problem. Hey, like for some reason we can never hit our deadlines, or, content creation in our across our team always feels chaotic, or whatever it is, right? There's sort of like certain pain points that I've recognized here. I'm not really sure if you can solve it or how you solve it, but I just know that like something doesn't feel good, right? And so I think the content that we're trying to create here is I think we talked about yesterday was sort of the idea of like holding up a mirror, right, for folks to say like, oh yeah, like I have that problem. I'd love to know why, like what's causing this, and how I might think about start trying to fix it. um, we're generally not thinking quite yet about specific solutions, but we're at least trying to get an idea of like what are the root symptoms, or what are the root causes of the symptoms, I should say. So let's talk about that. um, Demand gen. So we want to connect the Optimist brand to the idea of solving specific common pain points. We want to demonstrate our team's expertise at handling, solving, fixing a key set of thematic common content marketing challenges. Uh, I think, I think this one's a no-brainer to me. I think this is a podcast or like a YouTube, a show of some sort, right? We get people on, other content marketers who kind of fit into our ICP, and we say, hey, you had this problem where you couldn't create content fast enough. How did you solve it? And we sort of talk through like what that looks like, how you sort of diagnose the root cause of the problem, how you fix it, how you get better buy-in with your boss. Sort of that, again, some of those like soft skills uh, that live outside of just like writing good content. That kind of stuff. Um, Again, I think that's like a no-brainer. I think that's and again, I'm gonna group together podcasts, YouTube, right? It's some kind of like a show, basically, like an interview or like an interview show or something. Um, and then again, the beautiful thing about this is that if you're hosting the show, even if I've never personally solved that problem, uh, I get sort of that we've talked already about sort of that transferring of credibility. I get to sort of absorb some of that credibility by hosting that and talking about that in an authoritative way. Um, so I think that's super valuable there. Probably worth thinking also about LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is part of this too. And we might be getting into newsletter territory as well here. So I'm gonna drop that in here as a channel also. Um, I think this is sort of a repurposing play is my first thought, right? Is that like, do we start with like a podcast YouTube kind of thing, and then we sort of repurpose some of that content into posts that go to LinkedIn, and then we sort of repackage it further as part of like as sort of a newsletter, that kind of thing. I think that's ultimately the ideal situation, right? Obviously, we're building these like pretty granular content strategies, but the ideal situation is that at the end we sort of stitch everything together in a way that's scalable and repeatable. And so the more that we sort of have uh, synergy, for lack of a better word, right? We have sort of an interconnected vision for how this content could potentially be repurposed, without just being like a copy and paste of like, here's the podcast, click the link and go watch the go watch it on YouTube. Anyway, I think that would be good. How do we measure this? So, measuring the effectiveness of, podcast, YouTube, that kind of thing. I think is good is fairly straightforward, right? Listens, views, that kind of stuff. Um, but is there a deeper way that we could measure the specific goal of like connecting? Huh. Yeah, how would we quantify that? Can we quantify that? Hmm. I mean, if we want to think really broadly, right, we could, I mean, in theory, there's a lot of ways that you could measure this, right? We could run a survey, right? We could say, hey, what do you know about Optimist? What do you think about Optimist? Do you associate Optimist with X, Y, and Z, right? So that would be sort of the MBA approach to measuring this particular outcome. Yeah, Chris is saying, some kind of self-reported attribution. Yeah, kind of that's a good like sort of low tech, low, relatively easy way to capture some of that data. Um, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that's probably worth it. I mean, it's a little further down the funnel, I think, because obviously we're not really expecting this to generate leads like directly. Like somebody's going to go listen to the podcast and then immediately come like pay us money, per se. I mean, it'd be great if they do, uh, but probably worth adding to the mix. And we could certainly say, or we could have, I mean, we could even make it like super easy, right? We could say like, if somebody does submit a lead or whatever, or to maybe your point, we generally think about self-report attribution as a lead gen thing, but it could be, a newsletter sign up. During the newsletter sign up, we ask, hey, do you listen to our podcast or something? Yes or no. That could definitely be part of it. Okay, so I like that idea. I think I'm going to put LinkedIn last because I think what we're going to end up doing here is sort of repackaging. Oh, it's giving me a pain. Hang on a second. I think what we're going to end up doing is sort of doing these two things first, and then LinkedIn is sort of where we sort of rev up the repurposing um, engine. No borders, and that's probably going to wipe out the border I want. Of course, it did. Dang it. uh, This I should rename this live stream. Watch me fight Google Sheets to get my formatting the way I want it, because that's how I'm spending. Oh my god. All right, no borders. There we go. Okay. Newsletter. I mean, again, I think the obvious thing is obvious. Subscriptions, opens. Again, is there perhaps a way that we quantify that one step further? I don't. Why does it keep adding that border there? What a pain. I'm just gonna copy and paste this for now because I think that's good. Like that's a good way to think about it. Again, we could say in theory, right? You could say like when somebody becomes a lead or whatever, like are they, do they read our newsletter? Basically, is that how they discovered us or how they found us? And oh, I guess that's fair. We could also because we have newsletter data, so we can actually see like percentage of leads who read our newsletter, right? So we can see who signed up for it, how many times they got it, if they opened it, all kinds of stuff. We just got to connect those systems basically. Um, okay, now let us noodle on LinkedIn. Um, I mean, there are very limited LinkedIn metrics, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's probably impressions, right? Again, because we're really just at to the tofu stage. We're not really trying to drive even like an engagement. We just want people to see the thing and say like, oh, Optimist, makes a lot of content about how to overcome bottlenecks in your content marketing process. Like they must be good at that. That's sort of all we're really trying to do here. Um, so I think it's impressions. Okay, let's talk about tactics. So I mean, I think this is we already talked about this a little bit. I think it's like an interview show uh, with our ICP. X common problem. Any other ideas, right? That's just like the first idea that pops into my head. So interested to get other ideas for how we might approach this. And again, it could just be like a different take on how we might do podcast or YouTube, or a different angle that we might take. Um, would it make more sense to host a workshop, or for me to do a series of marketing lectures, or I don't know. It could be anything. Let's look at let's go back to our sheet for a second and see what else has been working for other folks. So I'm pulling back up my channel research sheet. And so as we talked about before, primarily um, there's heavy overlap between the YouTube and the podcast content. For the most part, these creators are creating either a podcast or a YouTube video, and then just sort of cross posting it to the other platform. But yeah, let's pull all these up, and then we can kind of comb through them and see if we glean any interesting insights. One of the limitations here, by the way, if you were on for this part of the live stream, is that we can see analytics data for YouTube. Of course, we can see how many views it has, that kind of thing. But we can't really see um, much about podcasts as far as unless they host on certain platforms, with most folks, it seems like most on like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. As far as I can tell, I can't see like what are the most popular episodes of this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a way to do that, and I just don't know how to work the platform well enough. So let me know if maybe I got that wrong. But yeah, so pulling up these videos, let's just go through them real quick. So first, you got a couple from Lenny that he did. So this is Ultimate Guide to SEO with Ethan Smith. Again, essentially this is like just like a Q&A, I think, with Ethan talking about this is pretty broad. I will say that this doesn't quite hit the bullseye that we've been discussing hitting with this content, where we're sort of touting a specific outcome or a specific pain point, that kind of thing. It's the ultimate guide to SEO means a million different things. If I think if we were going to recreate this piece of content, we would want to frame it from a different way, like how to scale your SEO traffic 100x or whatever, and then the meat of that would be like, okay, what was the process, what was the roadmap, how did you go about it, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them, those types of things. So again, sort of more outcomes focused rather than sort of general and topical. Yeah, so I think this is a little closer, right? So this is velocity of everything, how Ramp became the fastest growing SaaS startup ever. It's interesting. I didn't know that was true. Anyway, in this case, we do have a little bit more of like a North Star, like kind of outcome. Hey, how do you grow your SaaS startup faster? Basically, it's not super specific. I would prefer if it were more specific, but a little closer. Let's let's look at this. So this is also pretty generic, honestly. I'm sort of surprised, but you can see here. This is exit 5, by the way. So now we're looking at Dave Gerhardt's content. So he's interviewing our friend Ross Simmons. He's talking about B2B content strategy, what's working on LinkedIn and X. Um, hmm. This sort of feels like a different path here. There's a different flavor of content certainly than I think what we've been discussing. Um, and honestly, I think these other two are also sort of in that same vein. So this is from Superpath. Um, Content strategy for B2B SaaS companies. So obviously, this is that's a pretty broad topic. I would assume that the it kind of talks about how to think about your strategy, that kind of stuff. So it's probably not super duper duper uh specific, although I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe it gets into it. Yeah, I guess, kind of gets into the weeds here. And then we've got how to create reusable content templates with gather content. So this is like quite tactical, right? So this is, hey, here's how to do something. But I liked this example because I think this is a pain point, right? This is sort of a specific pain point for this ICP, which is that, like, I'm trying to scale this thing, but like I don't really have the right systems in place to make it scalable. Uh, anyway, so quick detour there, but let's flip back to our sheet and do a little bit more brainstorming. Ninad, you're saying this podcast is actually quite awesome. Which one are you referring to there? Let me know in the chat. Thanks for joining, by the way, Ninad. Good to see you, man. All right, so I don't know, man. I'm still stuck on this idea of like just doing this interview show with like an ICP, discussing how they overcame a common problem. Again, I think it's like I think the key there is that it's like pretty specific, but it's like generic enough that like a lot of people experience the same problem, right? So it's like how to get your boss to like buy in on content marketing, or how to unlock a bigger budget, or how to scale your content output without losing quality. Things like that, which are, again, we're sort of holding up that mirror for folks to say, hey, look, you probably have this problem. This person also had this problem. Here's the basic roadmap for how they solved it. It's not going to, obviously it's not going to be step by step, do this, this, then this, but it's at least going to give them an idea of like how to navigate the process. I'm going to stick with that for now. If we come up with a better idea later, we can always add it in. How do we repackage that for a newsletter? I think we take roadmap from podcast and make it tactical. Okay, so one of the things that we talked about in terms of the newsletter was we want to take that podcast, or one of the things we talked about the newsletter was that part of the draw of like a Lenny's newsletter, right, is that it's not just sort of theory. It's not just like strategy. It's not even just like a framework. It's also tactical, right? So it goes from you've got this problem. Here's the roadmap to how to solve it, and now here are like specific action items and steps to take. So as we talked about before, I don't that generally doesn't make for great podcast content, because nobody wants to really like listen to you describing step by step how to do a thing or like set something up in Asana, generally speaking. But it makes for good newsletter content, because now you can say, okay, like, we're going to take that and then we're going to go even deeper and show you, exactly how to implement this sort of step by step. So I think sort of extending the value of that podcast with the newsletter, I think is a good sort of tie in there. How does that work for LinkedIn? Again, I think that this is overall kind of like the overall approach here is that we have sort of like a repurposing strategy. So we're starting with the podcast. We've got the newsletter. Now we're getting to like LinkedIn. What do we know about LinkedIn? We know that it's sort of we've thought about it primarily as an affinity play, right? It's sort of high level. The content that uh, this is stories. This is stories, right? Tell compelling text stories from podcast episode, right? So the reason why I quickly jumped on that is because what we talked about in our research here, right, is that the content that really does well here, right, is has an emotional resonance, right? So when we looked at the best performing content from folks like Ross Simmons and Dave Gerhardt and Chris Walker and Jimmy Daly and all these folks, right, there was sort of a human to human emotional resonance kind of vibe that seemed to be kind of the most pervasive the most pervasive approach to content, uh, regardless of the format, right? So what we found was that multiple content formats seemed to work equally as well. We didn't see any clear themes that like, oh hey, text definitely outperforms video or video outperforms carousels or anything like that. Seemed like a lot of, if not all of those possible formats could work with the right combination of other factors. And that one of those main factors, again, being this emotional resonance idea. So if we go back to this idea of like, how do we take a podcast and make it work really well for LinkedIn? It's not, here's 5 tips from our podcast with so-and-so. It's, so-and-so was having this particular problem. They were feeling really shitty. Their boss was being a jerk, whatever. You tie into that emotional story of like what they went through and then how they sort of triumphed from it. And then I think from there, you can, again, kind of repackage that probably 1,000 different ways, which by the way, that was another one of the themes that we identified for LinkedIn is that that idea of like thematic remixing, right? So you zoom in on the story, you take that pain point that they experience, right? Again, hey, my boss won't listen to me. That's a pain point. And then you sort of explode that into several pieces of sort of like micro content or native content for that particular platform. Yeah. On emotional pain points. So again, the idea being, if I read this thing, like I should feel that emotion, and I should also, sort of see myself a little bit in that story, right? I think that's the key here to really making it work from a LinkedIn perspective. Hey Chris, bit of heavy lift, but what about for every podcast, if you create an accompanying template or playbook that people had to subscribe to your newsletter to get, i.e. Google Doc or spreadsheet? Yeah, that could definitely be interesting, man. Yeah, let's toss that in here. I mean, I think, yeah, there's a lot of like, again, sort of sort of cross, co-mingling that we could be thinking about here in terms of the podcast feeding into the newsletter, and feeding into LinkedIn. And that's one thing that we should think about here in terms of tactics. We can think about it here now. We'll probably revisit it once we get to the middle of the funnel. But part of the tactic here needs to be, how do we drive people to sign up for this stuff? Right now, there's an obvious, sort of LinkedIn can be a driver for sure, right? So, let's just pop that in here, right? Drive signups for newsletter, podcast, etc. But what are some of the other levers that we might explore here, for how we how we grow the audience for these things? I mean the podcast and YouTube, obviously there's like the algorithm piece of it, so that could be helpful for us, but that can't be our only strategy. It's just like let the algorithm send people our way. We got to think about what are some other tactics that we could do here. Um, I guess the most obvious thing is actually looking down here at this next function, right? So again, another thing that I've already said, but I'll just repeat, is that we are treating SEO as a function here, for the purposes of mapping out this process. Obviously, SEO is primarily a channel, but nevertheless, and in fact, we could also entertain the idea of SEO as a channel specifically for some more supporting demand gen. But for our purposes, we're sort of treating it as its own channel, or its own function as well as a channel, I should say. Anyway, all that to say, if SEO is the primary channel here, let's call it search, right? Whatever. And interestingly, do we want to lump in an LLM as a channel that we're focused on here? That could be also part of our strategy, right? I'm gonna group all that together, right? I don't know. SEO maybe isn't going to be called SEO anymore once you start thinking about optimizing for AIs and LLMs. But anyway, we want to increase our share of voice for search topics related to content marketing, pain points. I mean, I think this one's pretty straightforward, right? So it's like number of tofu keywords in top 3, top 10, that kind of thing. Organic traffic to tofu content. Tactics here, right keyword optimized content for tofu topics. I mean, the playbook here, this is sort of, I think, the beauty and potentially the drawback of SEO being a major lever in your content marketing strategy is that the playbook is really clear. There's only so much like sort of experimentation here. I'm being a little bit facetious, of course. There's like programmatic plays and UGC and all kinds of stuff that you could potentially do, but most companies are going to follow this pretty straightforward playbook. You're going to write keyword optimized content for tofu topics. Anyway, I jumped down here because I was going to say that we could also tie in a newsletter, tie in the podcast. This can be another driver, right? So integrate podcast/YouTube clips into written content. So presumably, right, if we're writing content about pain points and we've got podcast episodes that talk about pain points, then presumably there's sort of a cross promotional opportunity there. Drive, CTA for newsletter sign up kind of thing, right? So obviously, the standard playbook for most companies is get people to come to your site from search. You show them some other media content that you might have, and then you try to get them to sign up for your newsletter. I think that's a viable strategy there. So I think the metric here is this is something that we've been sort of working on internally for some of our clients. If you remember Mofu, you've probably already seen this, or if you're a member of the Optimist team. But yeah, we create a very basic, it's not super sophisticated, but we do have like sort of a basic scorecard that we use for tracking visibility across LLMs. So generally we're looking at Google's AI overviews, formerly SGE, as well as like ChatGPT. So like if I go type in, if I ask ChatGPT what's the best content marketing agency in the world, do they say Optimist basically, or does Optimist show up there? So that would be like the main metric. I don't know how else, maybe we could also, our score includes a sentiment analysis, a basic sentiment analysis, but we could even go one step further and look at the sentiment. This is where it gets tricky. We don't really know the tactics for appearing in these for the most part, right? It's kind of a black box. It's one of the challenges with the LLMs. So we don't really know like a specific steps that we can take to improve, the times where we appear in these LLMs. Couple of things that we think we know, right? So what most of them are super like in the weeds, right? So it's like how you construct your content seems to play a role, and how you sort of phrase specific things. I know what I'm going to put in here. So one of the things that we've seen as a pattern, this isn't like a proven strategy per se, but one of the things that we've seen as a pattern is that these LLMs tend to prefer things that say like, so-and-so who is an expert in whatever says X, Y, and Z. says Optimist is the best content marketing agency in the world or whatever, right? So I'm wondering if we could apply that same kind of framework here. Again, our goal at this stage is really not even to get people to think Optimist is the best content marketing agency in the world. It's just to get them to think that, like, oh, hey, if I have this problem, like, Optimist might be able to help me solve it, or they might at least have information that would help me solve it. So could we have content, for instance, that says like, so and so, who is the director of content at X, Y, and Z, says, Optimist was a great partner for us, and they helped us solve A, B, and C. Or, Optimist's approach to solving this was great, or whatever, right? So something like that, where we're sort of baking in that, like, validation, or, like, again, coming back to the idea of social proof a little bit, um, to demonstrate our expertise in a way that's sort of consumable by the LLM. So it's worth noting that, again, the goal with this wouldn't be to say, so and so says Optimus is the best content marketing agency, or even so and so, helped us scale our traffic by 1,000%. So and so says Optimus helped us scale our traffic by 1,000%. That might be a valid thing that we would do further down the funnel. But for right now, all we're trying to do is, somebody asks ChatGPT, like, hey, how do I, like, increase my team's content output? Right? Like, we would love for them to say, like, a lot of people say, say Optimist, or a lot of people refer to Optimist's content to help them solve these kind of problems, or something like that. That would just sort of associate our brand with these common problems, and also help these marketers diagnose those problems uh, as symptoms of, again, this, like, sort of outdated models, thinking and strategies, right? So I think that gives us a good stopping point here for tofu. Let me check chat real quick, see if anybody else weighed in. Sorry, I just realized I was probably blocking as I was typing there. Apologies about that. Um, yeah, sorry, Chris. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah. So anyway, what I was saying here is this. What I was filling in is this sheet here, or this cell. Basically saying, we could create content with attributed quotes about Optimist knowledge or understanding of the most common pain points. So again, just sort of demonstrating our expertise here. Let us move forth to Mofu. All right, before we get into this, I'm gonna take a 2-minute break here. I'm gonna use the restroom, grab a drink. I will be right back. Thanks again for being here with me and hanging out. Excited to keep going. All right, y'all, clocking back in here. Thanks for allowing me to take a quick break there. Cool. Let's jump back into it. Anybody who is newly joining us, first of all, say hello in the chat. Would love to know who's with us. Second of all, we've worked through channels, metrics, tactics for a pretty good variety of functions across Affinity, Tofu, and now we're focusing on Mofu. So we are trucking right through this process today. Yeah, let's get back into it. So our problem that we're trying to solve at the Mofu stage is that we want to convince our buyers that there's a clear and achievable path to overcoming internal politics, friction, and other barriers to improve content marketing function and output. Okay, so this is we want to increase the belief in a path to solving established problems. And we want to do that by demonstrating and establishing a functional playbook for overcoming specific problems, i.e., internal politics, friction, other barriers to improve the content marketing function and output. Okay, so I am not going to lie. I am sort of rethinking the way that we've just sort of framed this. This certainly feels more suited. And I know we kind of touched on this before, right? I guess this ultimately kind of serves both purposes, right? So it associates our brand with sort of solving these problems, right? Optimist hosts this podcast where they talk all about how to solve common content marketing problems. We're sort of achieving this goal, but really we're also ultimately achieving this goal, which is that we're creating content that gives this ICP, the audience that we're trying to reach, it gives them sort of a vision, or at least like an idea about how they might actually overcome those problems. One of the things we talked about yesterday was that, from the conversations that I had with these folks, there's a lot of frustration and there's not always a lot of like clarity around how to overcome these problems, or if it's even possible to overcome them, right? So it's like, hey, I can't get buy-in from my boss for this thing, so I just can't do it, right? There's a lot of sort of like resignation to those being barriers without necessarily much belief in the idea that you can overcome them. So anyway, I think I think we just sort of pull this through. I mean, I think essentially what we're trying to say here is that at least this like YouTube podcast, the newsletter, I think all of this stuff maps still here, right? I think it's essentially the same, right? This is all, we're sort of spanning these two stages of the funnel with this content. Now, what I think is different here is this LinkedIn component, right? So the LinkedIn component, what we talked about was telling these stories. We talked about focusing on emotional resonance, and that was primarily because we're trying to sort of work the algorithm, right? So we're trying to increase our reach, grow the awareness, and sort of build the understanding of these problems. But when we get to Mofu and we're trying to think more about how to convince people that there is like an achievable path, I don't know, is it the same? Is it still the same LinkedIn content, or is there a different sort of flavor of content that we want to create for LinkedIn that is more, oh geez, don't do that to me, that is more specifically like kind of Mofu oriented? Thoughts? Let me fix my formatting, then I'll check on chat. One sec. Yeah. Let me flip here before I pop the chat. So right now, our LinkedIn, again, is focused on telling compelling stories from the podcast episode. Again, focusing on that emotional resonance and those specific pain points. do we want to adjust that or adapt that strategy, or again just sort of expand on that strategy to focus more on these topics for Mofu, where we're trying to demonstrate a functional playbook? I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think the story here, the stories that we're telling for sort of the top of the funnel, or maybe LinkedIn is just not even a strategy really for the middle of the funnel. Maybe we are just saying that the podcast and the newsletter are the primary drivers here. So the LinkedIn, yes, we're repurposing content from this, but really what we're trying to do is move people through to the next stage of the funnel here in the Mofu, where they are, watching our podcast or signing up for our newsletter or whatever, right? So I think that's actually the answer here, is that rather than trying to repurpose these LinkedIn posts in another way that works for the middle of the funnel, I think what we want to do is we want to just let them do their job at the top of the funnel, drive people to these sort of richer formats, where we can do a better job of like laying out the case for how to overcome these challenges. I think that's the right move there. Okay. Let's talk about lead gen. So we want to convert eyeballs into contacts, create a safe space. Okay, so this is where okay, so this was where I tried to get a little more creative on this one, right? So obviously the standard playbook here is, hey, you get people to your website, they sign up for your newsletter, maybe you make them download an ebook or whatever. Hey, look at that, you generated a lead. Uh, what we tried to think about yesterday was, can we do a better job of qualifying those leads by using a strategy that requires sort of a higher level of like self-qualification, essentially? Uh, and so the way that we talked about this was like, could we create some kind of like a safe space, like a community or like a cohort? I don't know if this is like a networking call or a Slack community or what. We can brainstorm some ideas around this. Where somebody, basically the vision for this is that somebody says, sort of raises their hand explicitly and says like, oh yeah, I have that problem too. I'd like to talk to somebody about how to overcome that problem. And so what they're sort of demonstrating is like, that they have like a clear need. Now, obviously, it's only one piece of qualifying somebody as an actual sales like prospect or an MQL or an SQL, but getting them to like raise their hand and say, hey, I have that problem, and I'd like to talk about it and maybe explore a way to solve it. Uh, the obvious answer here from the channels that we discussed is a community. Now, again, that could look like different. The tactical execution of that could look different, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be like a dedicated Slack community. It could be, a community group, or we get on a Zoom call, once a week or whatever, right? There's a lot of different ways that community can be sort of manifest here. What are our metrics? I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's the number of members and attendees for this community, right? Or like engaged members. Again, that's sufficiently specific, but also generic enough that, because we haven't talked about the specific tactics yet, that could mean the people who join a Zoom call or the number of people who join a Slack or whatever, right? Engaged members. Are there any other metrics that matter here? I don't think so, because again, our only real goal is to convert those eyeballs into contacts. Or I guess, I think we iterated on this yesterday and changed this from like MQLs to context to be slightly more vague. Because when we get further down, I think is where we start thinking about MQLs and SQLs. But anyway, I think that's good. Okay, so then let's talk about tactics, right? So we've already said it. We already mentioned a couple of things, right? We could do regular Zoom calls about specific challenges / frustrations, right? So we could just say, hey, we're having a call every week, and we're going to talk about how your boss sucks and how you don't have enough budget and these types of things. That's sort of like a event session / maybe like a group kind of group coaching kind of thing. That could be one way that we do it. Could be dedicated Slack, right? Dedicated Slack channel. Or I'll say, let me change that to workspace. It could be a channel also, like for instance in Tofu, but it could also be a dedicated Slack workspace. Weekly participants. Chris, are you? This looks like this comment was from a couple minutes ago. Are you referring to this this idea of community, like trying to get like a weekly Zoom call, for instance, or are you thinking about something else with that comment? I mean, another very unscalable approach is like a free consultation, right? So, hey, book a free consultation with us. We'll hear all about your problems, and we'll try to give you some free advice, basically, about how to do a thing. That's certainly one way that we could do it. What if we piggybacked? Okay. This is why I love this kind of like structured thinking exercise, is because if you were just sort of pure brainstorming, I don't think you would come up with. I don't think you would all. I don't. For me personally, I don't always see the dots. Right? I don't know. I don't always see the opportunities to connect the dots until I lay stuff out in sort of a structured format like this, or a spreadsheet, or even just a doc or something, or a whiteboard where I can sort of draw things and sort of see them visually. Here's my idea. What if we piggyback off the podcast, and we have sort of an opt-in like follow-up session? So the way that this might play out, for example, would be we record a podcast with a guest where they talk about how their main problem was they couldn't scale up their content production because they couldn't find freelancers that could meet their standards or whatever, right? They have like a very specific problem they had to overcome. Here's the steps they took to solve it. That's the podcast. The follow-up session, the lead gen portion of it is, hey, do you have a problem like this and want to talk about it? Sign up for this thing, this cohort. Again, could be a Zoom call or a whatever. It's some kind of a consultation ish or like a coaching ish kind of engagement. I don't think it's like a sign up for a workbook or an ebook or something. It's like a sign up to attend this like kind of follow on event. That could also, by the way, potentially include the guest. So it could be like a follow up Q&A kind of thing, right? Like I've been going to a film festival all week that they're having here in El Paso, and one of the things that they do is that they show films and they have like a lecture, right? So you can go to like the film, then you can listen to the lecture, or you can listen to the lecture, then you can watch the film. So kind of the same thing, right? It's like a supplemental thing. It's like, hey, if this particular episode of this podcast like really resonated with you, and you want to like talk about it further or sort of get more actionable insights for your specific scenario, then like come to this lecture or come to this Q&A or like this forum or whatever it is. I like that idea. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, weekly participants. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. As a metric to gauge. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, so I'm gonna put that down as a tactic. I think that's the way I'm leaning. Again, we're not gonna do every single thing here. We're just putting down ideas for right now, and we'll sort of tidy things up probably a little bit more tomorrow as our in our final session. But this is like a follow-on Q&A with the podcast. I think that's the most straightforward way to like describe it, right? It doesn't necessarily have to look like that, but I think that's the most straightforward way to do it or to frame it. It's like, hey, we're going to have this conversation with so and so. They're a content leader at this company that you really admire. Here's how they overcame a problem. Now you can opt in, which by the way, this also gives us a way to convert, even if they're not like a super hot like sales lead, we have sort of a path to converting another path, I should say, to converting these podcasts or YouTube audience into like an email audience, right? Like, sign up for this thing, you got to give us your email address, you register or like RSVP or whatever. Uh, yeah, that feels like a good through line there. Um, are there any other channels where we're trying to do lead gen? I guess, I'm calling that idea of having like mm, I'm calling this channel community, but I guess it's really kind of a combination, right, of community and email. And the channel itself is probably primarily email, and for driving, we're capturing someone's email, and then we're getting them to come to this to view this content via email. So I'm just going to combine those two things. We're not really like using community explicitly as a channel to drive, to achieve this goal. We're really using it as a promotion or like a distribution channel. Um, okay. Interested to get any other thoughts. If anybody else has thoughts in the chat, let me know. Uh, okay. I don't want to get too crazy with lead gen. I mean, obviously there's all these millions of like, playbooks that people have been using for years. I do think a lot of those playbooks are a little stale. I don't, what I don't want to really do is do like, sign up to get this free ebook or like whatever. Um, I know it works in many contexts, but I feel like for us being a content marketing agency, there's a little bit of an onus on us to kind of think outside the box a little bit there. So yeah, I'd like to have something that feels a little fresh and a little different from the way that we've historically done content marketing and lead gen from content. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. SEO is of course pretty straightforward. As before, we can break this down. We can sort of create some ideas or some tactics around how we might target LLMs specifically, which lets us get a little bit more complex here. So let me just copy and paste these because we're basically saying the same stuff here. Now we're saying MoFu keywords. And again, I think, the tactics pretty straightforward. This one is definitely going to be different. So we want to create content with attributed quotes about Optimist knowledge, understanding of most common points. So, mm, so what we're really trying to do here at the middle of the funnel stage, again, we're still not really trying to sell Optimist directly as like, hey, hire us now, we're the best. Really what we're trying to sell, I think, is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the BOFU stage as well, is that we're trying to sell, an agency broadly and sort of a collective or like a hybrid agency being our model as sort of the best path for solving these content marketing problems. Meaning like instead of hiring freelancers, you can hire an agency. Here's why it's better. So they haven't this person at this stage in the funnel, they haven't really like started exploring, I would say, like particular agencies necessarily, but they're sort of figuring out like, should we do this in-house, or should we hire freelancers, or should we get an agency, whatever, right? Like they're sort of trying to figure out what that might look like. And then at the same time, they're trying to figure out like if either or any of those are even like a viable path, right? Keeping in mind our sort of overarching problem here, which is that people feel like they're sort of stuck with these dealing with these problems, and there is not necessarily a way to solve them, or a path forward for resolving those issues. So all that said, I think we want to create content with attributed quotes about the value of working with an agency broadly versus other types of solutions, plus right. So again, let's just take this as like a hypothetical. Somebody goes to ChatGPT and says, "Hey, I run content marketing for a company. Should I hire freelancers or should I hire an agency?" Right? Like, that's maybe that never really happens in real life, but just as an example, if they do that, what we'd like for that response to look like is to say, "Hey, here's all the great things about hiring an agency. So and so who's an expert at what's it called, or so and so who's the CMO at a company says that hiring an agency was way smarter than hiring a freelancer because X, Y, and Z reasons," right? So ideally, again, if we're trying to influence the LLM there, we want to we're trying to sort of tilt it in our favor. And the main tactic, again, that we think works for that is basically having sort of first party quotes and sort of attributable sources stating the things that you want the LLM to say, essentially. So that might be something that we do there. Obviously, we're going to write that keyword optimized content for SEO purposes. We can integrate podcast YouTubes into the written content. I mean, that makes sense. CTA for the newsletter sign up. I mean, it's all pretty generic. I would love to better connect this. Actually, you know what? I know what it is. So when we get to BOFU, here's what we're talking about. So we've got help content leaders self-qualify as a good fit for the fourth path option. So we talked about this yesterday. We don't know exactly what this tactic is yet, because we haven't gotten here, obviously. But the idea being, something like a quiz, right? Where it's like, hey, like, are you scared of hiring an agency, and are shy about hiring freelancers? Like, take this quiz and figure out if you should take this fourth path, or if a hybrid agency would be a better option for you than traditional agencies, something like that. So I think that's actually our CTA here. So when we're talking about the middle of the funnel stage, and we're trying to move people to like BOFU, then I think what we're trying to do is like CTA for self-qualification tactic, right? Insert specifics here, because we haven't defined these yet, so I don't know exactly what that looks like. But the most basic idea that comes to mind is like it's a quiz or something, where it's like you fill out a bunch of information, and it tells you like, oh yeah, here's why working with a hybrid agency like Optimist would be great, because you have these problems and you need this kind of support. Okay, so now I've got SEO, lead gen, demand gen, which, by the way, I should mention, I know probably a lot of people would argue with me that demand gen isn't middle of the funnel. It's more like Affinity and Tofu only. But yeah, we made that decision yesterday. You can go watch that stream if you want to see me litigate that that distinction. Same, funny enough here. I also pulled demand gen even into BOFU, right? So, all right, let's talk about the BOFU thing. So one of the things that we came up with yesterday, which I think was a smart insight. Feel free to tell me if I'm an idiot if you would like, but basically the idea here being that rather than sort of selling like Optimist versus, I don't know, Siege Media or other agencies that somebody might consider, the strategy here, or the problem that we're trying to solve, and then that sort of leads to a strategy, would be we actually want to convince people, or we want to establish that there's sort of like this fourth option, and that Optimist fits into kind of this new category of partner. So the idea being, we're not an agency, we're not a freelancer, we're this like sort of hybrid collective model. And that's actually a better option for you and your business than these other two options. So you're not comparing Optimist versus Siege. You're comparing, do you want to hire an agency, or do you want to work with a collective? Or do you want to hire freelancers, or do you want to work with a collective? So if you want to work with a collective, you want to hire Optimist, right? So that's sort of the approach that we landed on yesterday. I think that's a good one. I don't know. Feel free to chime in the chat if you have other opinions. So let's talk about demand gen. Our goal there is to just basically sort of create awareness for this idea of like a fourth path, like kind of a hybrid model, the collective or Optimist, specifically. So at this, this is why we sort of brought demand gen all the way down to the bottom of the funnel, because what we're talking about yesterday was in order for there to be demand for this new type of partner, we have to first, create awareness for that new type of partner. And so, although, you might consider that more top of the funnel or awareness kind of stuff, it does tie into kind of the bottom of the funnel as like a decision factor. So the strategy here, juxtapose Optimist's hybrid model with common issues when working with agencies or freelancers. So basically what we want to say here is that, like, hey, are you having these problems working with agencies and freelancers? Here's why, and here's how like Optimist fixes it, or here's why Optimist is better. Again, I do got to take some shots at freelancers and other agencies here. So sorry to anyone who's tuning in who fits into either of those groups. What's up? What's up, Robert? Thanks for chiming in. Hire Jasper AI. YouTube is a search engine. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's true. That's true. We haven't really we haven't really touched on YouTube as a search engine. So that's maybe worth leveling in here. Are you having problems bleeding $300 agency fees? Exactly. You get it, Robert. Thank you. All right. Let's talk about what this looks like. So what are our channels for this? I think our channels are, yeah. So this is where we have sort of the conflict between SEO being a function and a channel. I think SEO is a channel in this stage, right? So like, for instance, if you search for, should I hire an agency or whatever, I think we want to appear here. I guess we can just call it search, right? We've already used the channel search. Theoretically, also works for LLMs. So that could be another channel that we're focused on here. And then what else we got? LLMs. Maybe like a LinkedIn. Do you want to go back to LinkedIn? I mean, this is pretty deep in the funnel to be trying to like sell people via LinkedIn. But to be fair, I mean, search also obviously, spans the funnel, right? So you bring people in. How does this connect to our like email and like our newsletter strategy? Is there a way that we tie that in there? Those people are, ostensibly, more qualified. I mean, I guess the most obvious way that we bake that in, or sort of thread, connect those two dots, is that, if our sort of primary lead gen channel for generating contacts is, some kind of a Q&A or something that people are signing up for, then we sort of leverage that as a touch point to talk about this idea, right? Of like, hey, by the way, like, the problems that we're talking about here, here's why agencies aren't always great at solving them. Here's why freelancers can sometimes, leave you without the right solution, something like that, right? So I guess if we're to call that a channel, right, we would say that's community, because that's what we called this. So we would say, we're going to use that community channel, those Q&As with the podcast guest, for instance, to sort of advocate for the fourth path idea. Okay. Create awareness for, okay. How do we measure this? I think the best way to measure this is like, okay, so let's say I think what ultimately what we're describing here is very similar to like a category creation play. And so I think the way that you measure the effectiveness of your category creation efforts is to look at search volume over time for some particular term. Ideally, something that most people have not used in the past, and you're sort of coining this new thing, right? So again, imagine HR software doesn't exist. You're the first ever HR software. One way to know how good of a job you're doing of like creating awareness for HR software is to measure search volume, search interest over time. So I think that's one. I think that's it. Search volume for sort of like a semi-branded category term. I don't know what that is yet. Again, hybrid agency, collective agency, whatever it is. And then I guess to be fair, if we're sort of inextricably linking the idea of Optimist with that category term for Optimist, or I guess maybe just like branded search traffic for Optimist, right? So meaning like, hey, we're just sort of raising general awareness for Optimist, and then maybe we have some kind of a page that we are optimizing for this term that we're like coining, which again hybrid agency or collective agency or something along those lines. And then we're sort of pitching that, and we're in these Q&As, and then we're measuring it based on are people actually looking for that after the fact. Another thing that we could do here is we could create some kind of guide, landing page, explainer, basically, rather than just saying, in this Q&A, rather than just saying, hey, by the way, you should look into hybrid agencies, they're great. We could say, hey, go to our website, check out our hybrid agency guide, and see if that's the right fit for you, that kind of thing, right? So something along those lines. Search, how do we measure search? Similar, right? I think our tactics are a little different here, because we have to first create, we have to first, in order to make search as a channel work for this, we have to rank for terms that are more established, and then sort of inject this new thinking, right? So we got to rank for, I don't know, the best content marketing agencies. And then, part of that article talks about why you should hire a hybrid agency rather than a traditional agency. Then people read that, they say, oh, that sounds interesting. And then, I don't know, maybe they read, they go out and search for hybrid agencies or whatever. So maybe one metrics here might just be like page views for content that contains hybrid agency definition or something like that, right? And by the way, I'm using the term hybrid agency. I'm not really committed to that as a particular term that we might want to like sort of coin here, but it's not a bad way to sort of define the model that we're trying to advance here. what's the next thing that we want to do? So LLM, I think this, we need some kind of like AI score for AI visibility score for like a semi branded category term. Again, hybrid agency, etc. So if you ask ChatGPT, what are the different types of content marketing agencies or whatever, we want them to say hybrid agencies, even if they don't mention Optimist by name. Tactics for this. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like create BOFU search optimized Right. So the tactic is basically, we create search optimized. Again, we rank for best content marketing agencies. Then when a reader comes on, they read about best content marketing agencies. We say, oh yeah, by the way, if you're looking for the best content marketing agency, you should be thinking about hybrid agencies. Here's what a hybrid agency is, and here's why it's better. That kind of thing. This one I think is the same tactic as we talked about with the other AI things, which is that we want to create content with attributed quotes about the create content with attributed quotes about the benefits of, I guess it's really about the existence of and benefits, the existence and benefits of hybrid / collective agency. So again, we're creating content about, as we create this search optimized BOFU content, we talk about how great hybrid agencies are. We should have, so-and-so who's a CMO of what's it called says, hybrid agencies are awesome. They're way better than traditional agencies or whatever. Right. Hey Robert, sorry, I'm just catching up with your chats here. I've only got my one screen going, so sorry if there's a little bit of delay here. But you're mentioning case studies in Search Console. Let me know kind of what context you were talking about those in, and I can see how they fit in. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's talk about lead gen. So here's where again, we're trying to figure out like how do we get people to self-qualify for this idea of being a good fit for the fourth path option that Optimist presents. Let me just jump right into it before I lose the thread on this. One of the things that we talked about was like a quiz, right? So quiz, what kind of agency is right for you? It seems a little pedantic, but I think that the concept there is correct. Where does this fit in? What are the channels here? I think the channels here, certainly search. Some of this search work that we're doing here should feed into this, right? This is sort of the call to action. Probably community. Yeah, this like community email that we mapped out before. And then the last thing that I was just thinking is like, we could at least test the idea of doing this on like a podcast or YouTube, right? So even if somebody's only, I don't know, tofu or mofu stage, right? And they're just like listening to our podcast about how to speed up your content output or how to improve your content quality or whatever it is, we could have like a quick ad in there that's like, hey, go take our quiz, see if you're a good fit for this or whatever. That's one way to do it. Before we get there, let's talk about metrics. Metrics here. So what we're trying to measure is, our goal is to convert MQLs to SQLs. I mean, I feel like that's pretty straightforward, is it not? Completions of self-qualification tactics from search, right? So like how many people did we kind of send from search to this quiz or ebook or whatever, whatever this tactic might be here. Uh, same same thing here, right? We're trying to get completion of self qualifications, but from I get that's probably email, but or from our like live Q&A, right? So we could create like a trackable link that we give people on those specific if they're attending, for instance, that Q&A with a podcast guest, and then we could say, go to so and so URL to check out our quiz. Same idea here. Which is so cool from, but this is from podcast YouTube. And I guess while we're at it, we sort of lumped together this community and email previously, but there's also the newsletter, right, which is sort of the same thing, or not not necessarily the same thing, but there's the same opportunity. From the newsletter, we got to create that trackable URL for that as well, right? So you open up the newsletter, you read the newsletter, and at the end it says, hey, should you hire a hybrid agency? Here's how to know. Let me check in a chat here. Doesn't look like we've got anyone sending through any messages, but yeah, if you are with me and you have any questions, let me know. We're getting towards the end here, y'all. We're almost done. We've only got half an hour left for today's stream. Let's check my calendar. I don't think I have like a hard stop, but just want to make sure. Yeah, I'm good. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the tactics for this, right? So again, I think the most obvious thing is that we've got some kind of a quiz. What's another way that you get people to self-qualify? It'd be like, a buyer's guide is another kind of example, right? Like how to pick the right agency or the right kind of agency. Where you go, you kind of go through like here's what to look for, and here's how to know, here's how to figure out what you need, that kind of thing. What's another? I'm trying to think. So this might be a good time for us to kind of revisit our persona and just kind of get a sense of like what matters to these people. So the the people we're trying to reach here, once again, recapping, but content marketing leader, head of content, content director, content marketing manager, etc. At a mid-sized company, which again we're roughly qualifying as somewhere between like 500 to 5,000 employees, or 200 to 5,000 employees, somewhere in that general range. They generally lead all the content creation. They generally work as like air traffic controllers, where they're collecting, planning, and integrating content requests for PR. They are responsible for sort of resource management and trying to some semblance of strategic alignment across these various teams. They also have to have kind of a repurposing vision and workflow. They have to have they often work as a support function, meaning that like, these the PR team comes to them and says, hey, I need a blog post about X, Y, and Z. And, it's sort of up to them to fulfill that request. We know that these people primarily like to consume content via LinkedIn, YouTube, newsletters, communities. We heard a couple instances of people talking about taking courses. I didn't hear anybody explicitly say they like to take quizzes. Hmm. So, what is the deciding factor here for these folks? How do they determine? I guess what we're trying to sort of combine here. Why this is so difficult at this stage is because we're really getting to the meat of like, why would someone pick us? And then how do we sort of lay down the breadcrumbs to help somebody go from I need help with content to I need to hire Optimist specifically because of what they do better than everyone else. And we want people to self qualify ideally for that, which means they need to input some specific information and sort of get like a diagnosis back, or they need to read a piece of content that will help them sort of self diagnose, or or they need to have some kind of a third party who is like helping them diagnose. Now, that's not quite a self qualification if you're there's third party involved, but the point being that they're not coming to us and we're qualifying them or we're selling them. Like they've already qualified themselves. They already are sort of committed to this path by the time they reach out to us. Um, hmm. I don't have any other great ideas that are coming to me right away here. Might be just because I'm like kind of losing steam, but I think it's some kind of a quiz, maybe like a buyer's guide. So it's. I mean, these are fine. These are standard ideas. I don't think there's anything wrong with these approaches. I was hoping I would land on something more creative, more unique. Uh, and I don't have sort of like a breakthrough idea right now. Mhm. All right, I'm just gonna leave it there for now. We might come back to that maybe tomorrow or maybe later if I've got a little time at the end here. I think again, I think these are fine ideas. I don't think there's anything wrong with these. Maybe that's where we start, but I'd love to. I feel like it's another one of those situations where like I feel like there's another better answer, and I just haven't quite landed on it yet. So definitely want an opportunity to come back to that in the future. Um, okay, let's talk about life cycle. So our life cycle goal is to convert more MQLs into SQLs by providing compelling evidence to help content leaders campaign internally for investment in a fourth path. Okay, yeah. So let me just jump ahead here because I think this is a tactic right away. Like there's a clear tactic here. This is some kind of like a toolkit for content leaders to sell agency content, etc. So it's like I need to sell this internally. I need a template or a forecast or some kind of a sales sheet, some kind of a one page or something that I can take to my boss and say, here's why. Ideally, not only here's why we need a content marketing agency, but here's why we should actually pursue, this specific type of agency, or even Optimist in particular, is because they check all of these boxes. All the other vendors, they only check these other boxes. That kind of thing. Or hey, I know we've been burned by agencies in the past, but here's why this is like a better solution. Uh, yeah, so I think that's pretty straightforward there. That probably comes from search, probably comes from newsletter. Yeah, definitely from the newsletter, maybe from the podcast. That's a little again, we're sort of premature there because if we're envisioning the podcast really sort of starts at the top of the funnel, expecting that audience to be willing to like go download a toolkit or whatever. Um, might be a little overzealous. TBD. Newsletter. We got newsletter. Yeah, same thing here. I think this works. So again, we've got this idea, like we're sort of combining this like community email kind of thing where they're basically like opting into some kind of like a follow-up Q&A or something where they again are self-diagnosing a particular problem and they're looking to learn more about how to solve it by asking questions. Creating our trackable URLs for these. We've got search, download, of Toolkit. Okay. SEO, Bofu. Once again, I think the playbook here is pretty straightforward. I think we basically copy and paste this and just adjust the specifics here. Oops, looks like I have a typo here. Bofu keywords. Okay, so now we're doing Bofu keywords, organic here to Bofu content. We want to write. So yeah, this is going to be a CTA for like a self-qualification tactic, or to be honest, this could also be the toolkit that we just talked about, right? So the CTA here could be the self-qualification, but chances are, the content itself is going to include like some qualification things. It's like, hey, if you're deciding between freelancers and an agency, here's how to know which one is best for you. Here's why, hybrid agencies are great. And here's why to pick Optimist specifically. And then, so they've already, I think the content itself likely already contains like a level of self-qualification. And then in which case, the toolkit might make more sense as a CTA. Then we've got the AI visibility score down here, along with the sentiment score. And then our tactic here, once again, is to like create content or sort of structure our content around this idea of like attributed quotes about the value of working with an agency. Hang on. This is about. I think this is more about Optimist specifically, right? We've already talked about demand gen, which is like the category, kind of advancing the category. I think at this stage down here, where we're talking about SEO, again, we're sort of primarily focused on helping readers evaluate and decide between specific content marketing products and services, meaning, not necessarily just like choosing between freelancers and agency, but actually choosing to work with Optimist of all agencies, right? Which is actually a good point. We may also want to adjust the CTA, right? So the CTA here may also just be like an inquiry, right? So inquire, talk to us, reach out, whatever. Especially if somebody is truly kind of at the bottom of the funnel where they're like evaluating, potential content agencies by name or something like that. Yep. Okay, I think that gets us through Bofu. Let's talk really quickly about retention. Okay, I am definitely feeling the effects of live streaming for 4 days straight. All right, so we got to make our clients really proud of the fact that they work with us by establishing the quality and or exclusivity of our clients. Okay, so this is one of the things that we talked about at the very end of the live stream yesterday was basically, how do we leverage our brand as sort of a retention strategy, and what does that look like from a content perspective? So, ultimately, we want to motivate our client contacts to sell the value of our work internally to other stakeholders and executives. And so the overall thing that we talked about yesterday was that a lot of our like direct contacts either don't have the data or the tools or the knowledge or the time or something to really like sell it internally, right? They're focused on the content creation piece of it. They're not really focused on sort of like managing up, if you will, or kind of selling internally, which puts us potentially at risk because we don't have kind of that like true internal champion who's really like selling, hey, these guys are great, they're doing great work, here's how great they are. So one way that we might help solve that problem is to make our clients really proud, right? So make working with Optimist sort of a luxury brand, if you will, meaning like, hey, we work with this agency. They're obviously great, as evidenced by the fact that like everybody else wants to work with them, or some other kind of particular evidence. So the strategy that we talked about was establishing the quality and or exclusivity of our clients. What does that look like in terms of channels, metrics, tactics? I mean, I think one is potentially LinkedIn as a channel, newsletter, actually podcast, YouTube, and our newsletter. Okay, so all of these I think are an opportunity to do this. We've also got like our website and stuff. Obviously, we've got logos and things there that kind of help reinforce this. But if we're just sort of thinking kind of purely based on content, I mean the metrics. How do we measure if our clients are proud? I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it would be like some kind of an NPS score or something, right? Like we would want to collect first party data. We could also measure it, sort of passively in terms of like retention, churn metrics. Okay, let's talk about tactics. So, how would we sort of highlight the exclusivity or quality of our clients, and sort of, yesterday what we were talking about was, again, kind of the idea like social proof or like transference of social credibility. So basically, hey, if you work with all A-list celebrities and Bob, then like Bob feels really good, right? So maybe we do something like client yeah, I mean the most basic idea here would be to do some kind of like a client acknowledgement post on LinkedIn, right? So hey, we love working with this company, we love working with Bob. Here's why. That would be one way to do it. If we wanted to kind of again juice up the we wanted to juice up sort of that social proof element, we could have something where it's like kind of like a client acknowledgement roundup, I guess, of some sort or something like that. There's some hurdles we have to overcome here, right? Anything that we're disclosing about clients is obviously potentially confidential. So, we can't publish a lot of like first party data on exactly what's going on in their business or anything. But we could say, hey, here's a roundup of like 5 things this month that we're really proud of, or like 5 businesses that we work with. And again, as long as we have sort of general permission to sort of disclose that our engagement even exists, which to some extent can be a tricky one. So the idea being, hey, we worked with Microsoft and Apple and Billy Bob's auto garage, right? And now all of a sudden, like everyone's like, hey, wait, like Billy Bob's Auto Garage, like how did they get in here? They must be a cool company or something, right? So we're sort of again kind of imbuing some level of quality or exclusivity, primarily by holding, perhaps some of our less well-known clients, uh, holding them up next to our particularly well-established clients. That could be one way we do it. Let's talk about the next thing, and we'll kind of come back and bounce between these two. We've only got about 10 minutes left, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. So we talked about generating internal enthusiasm for the work that's being actively produced. Highlight or emphasize the exceptional nature of the output versus peers, competitors, and others in the industry. Yeah. So basically, what we talked about here was just like let's just like equip our contacts with like ammunition where they go. They're about to say like, look at how much ass we're kicking. Now, one way that you can certainly do that is like through reporting, right? We talked about that. Reporting is one way. If we've got like sort of demonstrable evidence to say, hey, we drove 10,000% growth or whatever, that's great. Not applicable in all cases, right? If we're creating content for somebody and it's like, I don't know, content, sales enablement content, maybe they have data on like how that content performed in the overall discussion with that particular prospect or whatever. But realistically, it's pretty hard to measure like apples to apples. We also don't have any sort of external data necessarily that we can offer to compare it to, right? So we can't necessarily say like, hey, you guys grew 10,000% and your competitors grew Y%. There's some data we could pull potentially for that, right? Depends on what the goal is and what the content that we're creating is. So reporting is one way, just sort of keeping a scorecard, highlighting the achievements, that kind of thing. The next thing is that we could submit our work for awards, right? External validation, I think, always gets people excited. Hey, you guys make great content. Everyone else thinks so too. Another thing we could actually do here is maybe we did like a industry or like a peer review. Not the peer review and what you're, the academic sense, but like, I don't know, every quarter or whatever, we sort of take a look around and we say, what are all the other people in this industry doing? What are all your competitors doing? What does their content look like? How does our content stack up to their content? Those types of things. Again, maybe we're not looking necessarily at quantitative metrics, but just looking at sort of the quality of the content, the type of content that's being created. And then ideally, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can clearly say like, hey, look at, competitor number one, like they put out this blog post and it sucks. We put out a blog post and it's, awesome. And so, it would sort of, I think it's like a proactive way to kind of build additional trust with our client to say like, hey, look, we're kind of keeping an eye out on the industry and kind of making sure that we're keeping up or staying ahead of the competitors. That's one thing that it does. And then the other thing is that, it does, that is an artifact. So if I imagine that we were like put this together as some kind of like a PDF or like a report or something, where they could again share that internally and say like, hey, boss, check this out. Like Optimist looked at the work being done by all of our competitors. They compared our content to their content and look at how much better we're doing, like that kind of thing. That could definitely be an interesting one. I think that's probably where I'm going to leave it because I know we've only got less than 10 minutes here till we hit the 3-hour mark, and so far I've refused to bleed past the 3-hour mark. So let's leave that idea. I think that's a good one. We will come back to this tomorrow as we wrap things up. First of all, let's fill in our channels and our metrics and stuff really fast here. So I think this is like there's not really a channel here. We're not reaching anybody through a particular channel. Like this is going to be like email or Slack or something, and we'll just hand it off. And I would say there's an interesting. Again, I think the metrics here at a high level are NPS and retention and churn. We could possibly measure something else. One of the interesting things that I found from a lot of the conversations that I had with content leaders is that like you get these very weird qualitative, sort of like shadow goals that happen where it's like did the CEO share our post, or did like a friend of the CEO share our article, right? And that is just like a binary yes or no. But in a lot of organizations, that is sort of a metric, right? Like that is a metric that people actually evaluate quality, and so your boss might come to you and say like, hey, we got to write more articles that John, the CEO, and his buddy Mike share on LinkedIn or something. Um, and so yeah, that might be one way that we sort of quantify this. It is difficult to measure. It's difficult to quantify, I should say. It's not that hard to measure, but it's difficult to quantify because it is, again, a lot of times it's like a binary. Like, did they share it? Yes or no. I guess if you look at aggregate, hmm, yeah, I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like quantity of non-content stakeholders sharing content. Right now, obviously, that kind of bleeds into like the internal strategy and like, are we trying to get people to distribute our content, via their personal accounts or whatever? But I think if we can sort of measure that as like a quantifiable metric and say like, oh yeah, like this week our article got shared by 200 people in the company or whatever, uh, that would give us a general sort of measurement of like the internal perceived quality of the content. I think that's a good one. Okay. I think it's a good place to wrap it, y'all. Real quick. Oh, hey, Bavayi Deep. How's it going, man? Yeah, the recording's available. Just hit the YouTube channel. You can watch the recording of all of our live streams from the week anytime you'd like. Let's talk really quick before we wrap up about the remainder of our process here. So, first of all, we did all this, so that's good. We got all of our stuff done today. So tomorrow is a little bit of like a free day. Basically, what I want to do is I want to kind of come back in, get a fresh set of eyes on the things that we just mapped out today. Maybe iterate on some of the specific tactics that we already sort of mapped out, and then start to develop like maybe some specific content insights or ideas. Or I'm sorry, use the content insights that we've already identified from our like channel and content research to brainstorm some like very specific ideas or develop like specific content concepts, maybe like themes or particular formats and things like that we might use. But basically, we're just kind of wrapping things up tomorrow, right? So we're kind of taking another pass on everything, looking over everything, making sure that we didn't miss anything that we missed. Also thinking about again, iterating on any of the things that we came up with that maybe we could come up with something better or smarter. I mentioned that a couple of times in the brainstorm today. So again, maybe a fresh set of eyes tomorrow will invigorate my thinking. And then the other, the final piece of it is to start to just like jot some ideas down, basically, just to say like, oh yeah, we should write a post about this. We should do some podcasts with these people about these topics. Get a general sense of like the shape of the content that we're going to create and how it's going to look. All right. That's going to be it for today, guys. This has been an awesome session. Thanks all for chiming in, joining me, following along throughout the week. Thanks for all the input. Shout out to Chris and Robert and Nanad and Naveen, all you guys who were joining me here in the chat, Manuel, and providing input and ideas as I went through this. Is super helpful to have sort of a sounding board rather than just only talking to myself. So really, really appreciate it. Secondly, I will just mention real quick, if you want to get a copy of this content strategy canvas that we used today, any of the other templates, the buyer persona template, the channel research template, look for my post on LinkedIn after this. I'll do a quick wrap up on today's session, and there will also be a prompt where you can get a copy of the template there. So yeah, pop on over to LinkedIn. I'll see you tomorrow, guys. Thanks again for following along, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Cheers.